See who has the advantage. Oh, big left hand.
One punch can change a fight, but ground game changes an era today. In the UFC, the mat is where plans get erased, champions get crowned, and legends build their myths minute by minute. Across divisions and eras, their grappling rewrote the meta. This video is about the gods of that world, the fighters who made top control feel like prison time, or turned their backs into exit doors for your consciousness. We are judging UFC ground dominance only, how they get you down, how they keep you there, and how they finish when you break. Let's hit the canvas. But before we dive into the content, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's a small click for you, but to us, it means a lot. Thanks. Now, without much ado, let's begin. Khabib Nurmagomedov. In the UFC lightweight division, Khabib Nurmagomedov did not just have great top control, he made the mat feel like quicksand. From 2012 to 2020, his era learned one brutal rule. If Khabib locks his hands, you are spending the round on the floor. He forced fights down with chains, not prayers. Single to the fence, switch to an inside trip, back to a double, and if you stuffed one shot, he was already on attempt 2. He still owns the UFC record for takedowns in a single fight, landing 21 plus against Abel Trujillo at UFC 160, a mark that survives every new wave of wrestlers. What makes that god tier is the machinery once he lands. From half guard, he buries a crossface, wedges his knee through your hips, and traps a far wrist in the Dagestani handcuff so your escape tools vanish. Try to turn and he leg rides you flat, then climbs to the back. Stay flat and shoulder pressure plus short punches keep you pinned anyway. Watch Rafael dos Anjos at UFC on Fox 11 or Edson Barboza at UFC 219. Both world-class lightweights, both smothered by the same ankle traps and fence mat returns. Michael Johnson at UFC 205 is the clearest picture. A full round where every standing attempt ended face down again. The numbers match the eye test. Khabib ranks third all-time in UFC lightweight control time at 1 hour, 29 minutes, and 8 seconds. And he was a UFC champion with 3 successful title defenses. Even in title fights with Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje, the story never changed. Takedown, ride, break posture, finish from dominant positions. He did not just win on top, he erased your ability to play bottom. In UFC lightweight ground history, that is what a god looks like. Georges St-Pierre. In the UFC, Georges St-Pierre is the blueprint for complete MMA ground domination. People remember the jab and the timing, but the mat is where GSP built his empire. He is still the UFC's all-time leader in top position time at 2 hours, 22 minutes, and 5 seconds, and he sits second in career takedowns with 90. Those are not era-inflated numbers. Those are records that survived the entire 2020s grind. The scary part was the cleanliness. GSP did not shoot naked desperation double. He would tag you with the jab, make you reset, then blast through the hips or snatch a single and finish at the fence. Once you hit the mat, he passed like a technician and punished like a heavyweight. Half guard meant crossface. Clear the knee line, slide to side control. Turtle meant hip ride, flatten elbows until the guard cracked. His UFC receipts are the gold standard. John Fitch at UFC 87 got taken down at will for 5 rounds. BJ Penn at UFC 94 was a masterclass of takedown to pass to damage. Josh Koscheck the Tekun and Jake Shields showed that he could wrestle through elite opposition without giving up position. And even late, when he moved up to middleweight, he still used takedowns and top pressure against Michael Bisping at UFC 217 before finishing on the ground. 9 straight welterweight title defenses do not happen because you are good everywhere. They happen because when GSP wanted top position, he got it. And when he got it, you stayed there. In UFC ground game history, he is the complete package: entry, control, and damage. Islam Makhachev. Islam Makhachev is the modern era's ground game ruler, having proven his system works at 2 weights in the UFC. At lightweight, he set the divisional record with 4 straight title defenses, then vacated the belt in mid-2025 to chase history. At UFC 322 on November 15, 2025, he walked into the welterweight division and treated a champion like a rookie. 4 takedowns, over 19 minutes of control, and a 5-round shutout of Jack Della Maddalena to win the UFC welterweight title and tie the all-time win streak record at 16 straight. Islam's top game is patient violence. He runs you to the fence on a single, shelves the leg, and when you post, he mat returns you like a reset button. The second you land, he's already passing. Legs stapled, near arm pinned, half guard pressure feeding his arm triangle and Bravo choke series. If you turtle, he rides calmly, Wrists trapped, hips heavy, then climbs to the back when you finally crack. The receipts are nasty. Charles Oliveira got strapped to the mat and finished with an arm triangle at UFC 280. Alexander Volkanovski, one of the best pound-for-pound scramblers ever, still spent long stretches trapped under rides at UFC 284 and UFC 294. Renato Moicano got dragged down and finished with a D'Arce/Bravo choke at UFC 311, which also locked in that fourth lightweight defense record. Lightweight or welterweight, contender or champion, Islam's UFC ground game is the current gold standard for control plus finishing threat. Demian Maia. Demian Maia is the purest proof that elite jiu-jitsu can rule inside the UFC cage. Across middleweight and welterweight, he made the same nightmare repeat. One clean takedown, then your back is gone. His UFC ground resume is carved into the stats. He ranks second all-time in UFC top position time at 2 hours, 1 minute, and 15 seconds, and he is tied for third all-time in UFC submission wins with 11. Maia's path to the mat was simple and ruthless. He covered the distance into a single or body lock, steered you to the fence, and dropped you at an angle that already lined up the back take. From half guard, he used an underhook and hip clamp to force you to turn, then sank hooks and locked a body triangle that felt like concrete. He did not chase flashy stuff. He chased inevitability, grinding until the rear naked or short choke opened. The UFC receipts are everywhere. Early on, he backpacked Chael Sonnen and Dan Miller. At welterweight, he turned Neil Magny and Carlos Condit into long, helpless rides. Jorge Masvidal's famous round at UFC 211 is a Maia masterclass. Every escape attempt just fed another hook. Even Ben Askren, an elite wrestler, got dragged into Maia's world and submitted. And through it all, Maia was never finished by submission in the UFC, which matters because a ground god has to be airtight defensively too. 2 divisions, 2 title runs, 1 unstoppable system. When UFC fans talk about technical dominance on the mat, Maia remains the measuring stick. Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira is the UFC's submission storm, and the scary part is that you never know where it starts. He might drop you, he might pull you, he might catch your neck in a scramble you thought you were winning. Either way, once the fight hits the mat, Du Bronx turns it into a trap maze. The numbers are not opinions, they are history. He is the UFC all-time leader in submission wins with 17. He also holds the UFC records for finishes and post-fight bonuses, both extended again in 2025. Oliveira's godhood is about systems, not single moves. Off his back, he chains triangle to armbar to sweep until posture breaks. On top, he's a backtake factory, climbing to body triangles the moment you try to stand. In transitions, he's a front choke sniper, guillotines and anacondas waiting for any sloppy shot. Even when he is hurt, that is often the doorway. Knock you down, follow you to the floor, take the back, good night. The UFC tape is a greatest hits playlist. Kevin Lee got swallowed by guard threats. Tony Ferguson got diced in transitions. Michael Chandler and Dustin Poirier both got dropped into the same cycle, hurt, shot, then ended up giving Charles their back in title fights. Justin Gaethje got knocked down, stood up, and still got backpacked and choked. In October 2025, he submitted Mateusz Gamrot, an elite chain wrestler, proving the system still bites at the very top. As of November 2025, he is still a top-tier lightweight contender near the very top of the division, because the division knows one thing. If Aldo Oliveira gets a ground exchange, the round can end instantly. Matt Hughes. Before cage wrestling became normal, Matt Hughes was doing it in the UFC like it was farm work. In welterweight, he did not just take you down, he launched you there and then punished you for landing. Hughes is still top 5 all-time in UFC top position time at 145.08 and second in welterweight top time at 141.51. Those are legacy numbers from a guy who fought when defensive grappling was rougher and rounds were chaos. Hughes' entries were a wrecking ball. He changed levels on singles, hoisted guys with high crotches, and spiked them with slams that stole breath and posture at the same time. Once on top, he passed a half guard, locked hips, and started carving with elbows and short punches until you turned or broke. Turned fighters got ridden flat and smashed. Closed guards got posture broken until they opened anyway. The UFC receipts define an era. The Carlos Newton slam at UFC 34 is still one of the most famous takedown into finish moments ever. He mauled Frank Trigg twice. Sean Shirk, Royce Gracie, BJ Penn, and a whole generation of welterweights who were not ready for that kind of top violence. He stacked 7 successful welterweight title defenses across 2 reigns and built the division's original wrestling pressure standard. Hughes was not a product of the early days. He was the reason the UFC had to evolve its ground defense. Every control and damage welterweight after him is building on his blueprint. Khamzat Chimaev. Khamzat Chimaev is the UFC's ground game nightmare in Fast Forward. He crashed into welterweight with first-round rides that felt unfair, then hauled that same suffocation up to 185 and took the throne. The loudest proof is UFC 319 in Chicago on August 16, 2025. Chimaev took Dricus du Plessis down almost instantly, banked a middleweight title fight control record of over 21 minutes with 12 takedowns, and won 50-44 on every card to become champion. His style is speed into paralysis. The entries are savage and simple. Blast doubles in space, or body locks at the fence that flip to outside trips the moment you widen base. Once he lands, he does not settle. He climbs. Wrist rides pin arms to the mat. Knee wedges block hip turns, and chest pressure forces your head the wrong way. Every escape attempt becomes a scramble. He is already winning because he stays glued to the hips and drags you right back down. You have seen this system ruin real UFC threats. Li Jingliang got mounted and choked in one round at UFC 267. Gilbert Burns, a black belt scrambler, still spent stretches carrying Khamzat's weight at UFC 273. Even Kamaru Usman, the welterweight wrestling king of his time, got owned in round 1 at UFC 294 by takedowns and ride time. In a modern UFC where most guys pop up fast, Chimaev's top game doesn't just win minutes, it breaks wills. That is why he feels like the ground god of this middleweight era. Merab Dvalishvili. If you want a UFC ground game built on pure, oppressive repetition, Merab Dvalishvili is your guy. In bantamweight, he turned pace into a weapon so sharp that even world-class strikers forget how to breathe. Merab does not need one perfect takedown. He needs 10 ugly ones because every return resets him right back to the top. That relentlessness is why he owns the UFC all-time record for career takedowns with over 100, officially sitting above Georges St-Pierre in the record book. His entries are a nightmare loop. He crashes into clinch, hits outside trips, dumps you off singles, and if you pop up, he is on a rear body lock for a mat return before your stance settles. On the floor, he rides more than he passes, using ankle picks and leg rides to keep his hips folded. It is old-school chain wrestling welded to modern cage MMA. Constant pressure, constant resets, constant no you are not standing. The receipts read like a highlight reel of control time. Petr Yan, an elite anti-wrestler, got drowned in attempts and stuck in rides. Henry Cejudo, an Olympic-level scrambler, still got dragged into long return sequences. Sean O'Malley lost the belt to that pace, and Umar Nurmagomedov could not solve the ride and return game in Merab's first defense at UFC 311. Merab added a third defense in October 2025 while setting the bantamweight single-fight takedown record with 20 on the way. Merab is not a submission artist. He is a ground god because he breaks rounds and wills with volume control no bantamweight in UFC history has matched. Marvelous verdict. So that is our walk through the UFC's all-time ground game pantheon. Different divisions, different eras, same nightmare. Once these guys decided the fight belonged on the mat, it was theirs. Khabib and Islam turned chain wrestling into a chokehold on entire weight classes. GSP and Hughes showed how top control plus damage can define a generation. Maia proved that pure positional jiu-jitsu can rule in MMA. And Oliveira reminded us that the floor can be a guillotine from any angle. Chimaev and Merab are the modern proof that the meta is still drifting towards suffocation, rides, and endless returns. That's the real flex. Doing it to champions in title rounds when everyone knows it's coming. The mat becomes a spotlight, and they own it. Legends don't just submit people. They take away choices round after round. Now, we understand that we may have missed your god, so why don't you name him in the comments? We'd love to hear from you.